debates, interviews, commentary, and analysis. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
Welcome back, everyone. Your host, Michael, on a Friday doing our third show for the day. We're asking questions here, such as, is there a missing third secret of Fatima? Will Rome host the seat of the Antichrist and others? These are questions based on a recent video that was brought to my attention by Mr. Kevin Simmons, who is joining me to discuss this. Kevin, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Got a little dull headache in the back of the head here, but otherwise I seem to be managing.
Understood. I hear you. I've been there before. Tell me about this video that we're going to review here.
Well, so yesterday I was going about my business and I got an email from a friend of mine in Texas. She's Cajun, but so she's got the Cajun accent, and she was just like, "Is this true?" So I was like, "What?" And I clicked on the link, and it was to an interview with John Henry Weston of LifeSite News with a French gentleman named Xavier Ayral. And he wrote a new book called Revelation or Revelations, I think.
Okay.
And that's basically the cause of all of this.
Okay. All right. So you have a video queued up for us here, correct?
I do, yes.
All right. Go ahead and tell us about the first clip that we're going to watch. I'm going to pull it up here now, in fact.
Okay.
Yeah, you should be able to see it on your screen now, too.
I do, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what we're about to see.
Okay. Well, basically, the YouTube video is entitled Missing Piece of the Third Secret of Fatima. And then there's a colon, Rome will host the seat of the Antichrist. And just to kind of give a little background, Monsieur Ayral was a protege or otherwise connected to the very famous French Mariologist Le Père René Laurentin, who passed away in 2017. I think he was about 99 years old. Very, very famous Mariologist, a titan in the field. And it is upon this platform that this gentleman associates himself with for this book to lend it credibility. I don't know the exact and precise nature of their relationship because he goes into some detail, but not a lot, like if he worked with closely, etc. I'm not entirely too sure. There may be more detail in the book, but he's a husband, a father, a knight of Columbus, he said. And so kind of like a humble presentation given to this gentleman.
Okay.
So he wrote this book called Revelations, I think it is, and it's basically a presentation of various alleged private revelations, both approved ones, so they're not alleged, and then ones that are not approved. And he puts together this picture to present kind of like a prophetic understanding of what we're going through right now with the present malaise in the church. And a part of that is Fatima. And so I'm largely going to restrict comments to what they say about Fatima.
By the way, off topic, but Father Brown is in the chat. He says, first of all, you're the man, but you have the worst impression of a Cajun accent. I have to hear the Cajun accent being from Louisiana. I need to hear this.
Oh, no.
Is it available anywhere?
I don't claim to have a Cajun accent. I just imitate my friend.
Okay.
She was like, Kevin, you got to call me. We got to talk about Medjugorje.
It's a little bit. Yeah, I can kind of hear it. Yeah.
It's a little off, I know, but I don't profess to have I don't profess to have a fluent Cajun accent.
I can kind of hear it though. Not too bad.
I can do a Southern African American woman impersonation pretty well.
That's
when I was living in Detroit, there was an employee there who was African American, and she found out about this. She was like, "I want to hear it," and I was like, "I don't want to be accused of being a racist or anything." She's "Oh no, honey, you're fine. I want to hear it." So I did my impression. Oh, she was on the floor rolling over laughing. She was just, that is so true to life. But yeah, so
I
can
love
do a
impressions
pretty
and
Bishop John
accents of.
Derfler as well.
Say that again.
I can do a pretty good Bishop John Derfler of the Diocese of Marquette. I can do a pretty good.
I don't know what his accent sounds like, but I like accents and hearing impressions, so I had to ask.
Oh, you should hear a friend of mine. He's a Byzantine priest. I mean, he could do Nancy Pelosi spot. You think she's in the room with you, right down to the clacking of her dentures. It's hilarious.
I'll have to hear that.
We could do Catholic Comedy Hour, all kinds of stuff. I'll tell you. One of these days, I'm going to tell you all. If we have like a stand-up comedy routine, I'm going to tell you the Archbishop and the enema story. Okay, it's too funny to pass up. You know.
Let's go ahead and pull up the screen here. What timestamp are we looking at?
Okay, well, the first kind of remark is in the beginning. John Henry Weston sets the tone for this interview, so I kind of want to begin it maybe just after the intro. Because there's some there's a lot of stuff that's compact in this video, and I'm afraid, with all due respect, I'm afraid that they just get it wrong and they are borderlining slander towards the Holy See, and I think that they need to repent of this slander. But I kind of want to set it up a little bit first, because John Henry sets the tone first of all. Here's how it begins.
2000, the church, under John Paul II, Cardinal Ratzinger as well, but also Cardinal Bertone, released what they called the third secret of Fatima.
All right, so right there, he says, in the year 2000, the church under John Paul II and Cardinal Ratzinger as well, but also Cardinal Bertone, released what they called the third secret of Fatima.
And by the way, hold on, because it kind of sounded like I was picking up the audio through your microphone. Can you reshare your screen? But whenever you go to share the screen, make sure to hit the button that says enable audio.
Sure. Hold on.
Try that again, and let's try to hear it again, because I can make it out, but it sounded like I was listening to it through your microphone.
Share system audio?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if you can play that clip back for us one more time, just so it could be a little bit more clear.
Okay.
In the year 2000.
Oh, wait. Pause. Okay, there we go. All right, I'm ready. Go ahead.
Okay.
In the year 2000, the church, under John Paul II, Cardinal Ratzinger as well, but also Cardinal Bertone, released what they called the third secret of Fatima.
Okay, so right there, I'm going to pause it here. John Henry begins on this note of how in the year 2000, the church under John Paul II, Ratzinger, and Bertone released what they call the third secret of Fatima. Two problems. One, Bertone wasn't a cardinal yet. He was still archbishop. He wasn't a cardinal until a few years later. But then he says what they called the third secret of Fatima. So right there from the get-go, he's instilling some kind of doubt. What they called the third secret of Fatima. And this happens in the first 10 seconds of the video. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Are we going to go this route now, please? You know, so he starts on this note of doubt. Then he continues.
They're saying now there's an echo, but I don't hear it. I'm trying to think what would cause. I tell you what, whenever you play the clip, can you mute your microphone? Let's see if that works.
Been waited for since 1960, hugely controversial that we never got it before, but
okay. Does the audio come through from the video?
No, I heard it, but y'all let me know in the chat if y'all are hearing. Okay, so if y'all can just verify that y'all are not. Okay, they're saying it's good. So just whenever you play the clip, mute your mic, and then whenever you come back, unmute.
Okay. So in the next few seconds, he then says about how something that had been waiting for since 1960, hugely controversial, never got it before. Technically true, but because he started off on that note of doubt, you kind of have to ask yourself, where is Weston going with this? What direction is he going to go in? So we're going to see that here as the video progresses.
when the experts on Fatima saw what was released, they were all like, wait a minute, something's missing. First of all, they said it's a vision. There's no explanation. If you remember, with the first secret, the children saw the vision of hell. But then there was the second secret, which was an explanation of that vision.
All right. That's the next part here. He then says, when the experts on Fatima saw what was released, he doesn't name these so-called experts, but I think I can dogmatically define, based upon my much familiarity on the subject. He's talking about your folks like Father Nicholas Gruner, the lawyer Christopher Ferrara, and Father Gruner's very close associate, Father Paul Kramer, who put together the book, The Devil's Final Battle. Because this was one of the early arguments that they had, was that it seemed incomplete, that there was the vision but no explanation. That was essentially their argument. So, and they were the ones that were the most vocal in promoting this. So it is very, very likely that John Henry Weston is referring to the Gruner side of the discussions, as it were, the Fatima Center. So he's taking these guys as being experts. I think that's a little questionable to call them experts. I'm not going to quibble over it, though. But it's what he then says next in the section that we just saw, where he says that the first secret, the children saw the vision of hell, but then there was the second secret, which was an explanation of that vision. John Henry is wrong. He's just flat out wrong. It's one secret, first of all, in 3 parts. One secret, 3 parts. The first part was the vision of hell. And the second part is not the explanation of hell. It is the devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And then there were prophecies associated with that, along with the requests. So, for instance, the 5 First Saturdays devotion and the consecration of Russia. All of that is wrapped up in the second part of the secret. But the second part of the secret is not an explanation of the first part, contra what John Henry Weston here imprecisely states. So right here in the first 35 seconds, we're already ticking off the problems that we're going to see here. And then he continues on in the rest of this to go. I'll present a little bit of it here, just so that people can hear it, how he introduces it. So I'm going to mute my mic again.
Well, lo and behold, all that was presented this time was a vision, no explanation. So there's all sorts of controversy. Well, there's a book out. There's a book out about Marian apparitions, a whole bunch of them, approved ones not yet approved, but very meticulously researched. And it claims to have that explanation, that part of the third secret of Fatima that's missing. It does so with lots of evidence. And that's what's truly fascinating. This book is called Revelations, and it's written by Xavier Arel, and we have him here today. This is the John Henry Weston Show. Stay tuned.
Okay, so I wanted to give that context so that people generally had it there. Now, I haven't gone through all of the book. I did order it on Kindle. I have it here on my phone, and I was kind of going through it a little bit. And John Henry very correctly did state that there are approved and unapproved private revelations that are in this book. Well, right there, automatically, we're going to have a problem. Because if you're mixing and matching all approved with alleged revelations, you're going to have problems. Because what criteria are used? This is a personal discernment. You're putting that over and above what the church has said, in a sense. And a timeline starts getting created, or a certain picture gets painted, and you're going to have a cluster bomb. That's the only real word I can say. You're going to have a cluster bomb of activity here, and it's next to impossible to start parsing it. So that's why I just want to point out the problem itself. The author, Xavier Arel, is going to be mixing and matching revelations, alleged, both approved as well as unapproved ones. So always very risky. Always a very risky thing. So there's the general introduction. They talk about stuff. I'm just pulling up the notes here. They begin with using the Signum Crucis. Now, fast forwarding a little bit to the 232 mark here, they start talking about a little bit more of the book. Involves messages and prophecies that the Blessed Mother gave or allegedly gave. And they make a certain point here about how we know about some of these revelations. Let me just mute my mic again so you guys can hear this.
That the Blessed Virgin Mary has given in so many occasions, so many places, and which have, for some reason or other, been purposely hidden by the authorities of the Roman Catholic Church.
I want to.
Okay, right there. These alleged revelations have allegedly been squashed, hidden by the authorities of the Roman Catholic Church. That's the claim. It's going to come up later on again. But I want to put that little pin mark right there. They're going to say that the church has been deliberately hiding these certain alleged revelations from the public. And we'll see they're going to talk about two in particular that one is La Salette, and I actually am going to address that one because I want to reveal some knowledge. I want to reveal a story to you all. And then the stuff on Fatima with the third part of the secret. This is where they're starting to go really off into the deep end of mystical quackery because they're now borderlining slander. They are accusing Holy Mother Church. Let me get this right. You have to get this right. They are they're setting the stage to accuse the church of deliberately, if not maliciously, hiding information from the public.
Isn't that the claim of Protestants and the Protestant reformers historically?
With respect to
hiding the scriptures from people so that they wouldn't know the truth about the errors of Rome, and etc.
Yes, that would be a fair analogy. I hadn't quite thought about it hadn't quite thought about it that way, but yes, that would be a fair analogy. By the way, when you just had your mic on, I heard a little static on your end. I don't know, the technology is getting all mixed up. Windows 10 recently updated, and I think it messed up my computer. So, okay, let me just be very, very clear. They're setting this up for a later direct accusation against the church. They're setting the stage for this, and they already said it. The guy already said it. This is the author right here. Let me just find the next point here. So he then John Henry intervenes. He then asks, "Hey, tell us about you." So the author of the book Revelations here gets into more of his background, some of the stuff that he's been involved in with Father René Laurentin, and he married an American woman. He said, I don't remember how many children he said that they have, but they have children. And he goes back, he talks a little bit more about Laurentin, and then around the 453 mark, give or take, they start getting into one of the criteria that Father Laurentin had taught to the author of the book here, and I'm gonna hit that now here. Let me just hit the mute button.
Let's see, but Father Laurentin used to say one thing: the only criteria that our Lord Jesus Christ gave us regarding discerning the truth from falsehood is a fruit of the tree. And yet today, Medjugorje, whether you believe it or not, it's one of the foremost Marian apparition sites in the world, where one of the greatest amount of pilgrims go. Over 2 million of conversions have taken place there. So knowing Father Laurentin in his soft way would say, you only assess the veracity of the apparition site based on its fruits. So this is one of the things I wrote in this book.
Okay, so the point that the author, who knew Father Laurentin, makes is that Father Laurentin had communicated to him that Jesus' only criterion for judging these matters is the fruits. It is true that Jesus talks about the fruits in Scripture, but this is not the only criterion that we use in discernment. The gentleman is making the fruits to be the almighty end all be all, and there's a much larger discussion here, and that's not getting into with finer points. And admittedly, there's only so much that you can get into in an interview such as this, and you're not presenting, an academic paper or something. I totally understand that, and so I want to cut some slack to the author here. But he's using the context of Medjugorje in order to go into this. And I want to bring something to people's attention. This is not something that a lot of people know about, but it's in the literature. Father Laurentin was in fact involved with Medjugorje, but what a lot of people don't know is he actually fudged some of the messages. That's not a very well-known fact, but it is. He actually fudged. There was one instance in particular that involved the visionary, I think it was Vishka, and she had quoted the Virgin, the Gospel of Medjugorje, as saying that there are always unbelieving Judases or doubting Judases, something like that. And Father Laurentin took it upon himself to amend that text to read doubting Thomases. This is bona fide history. It's established history. So Laurentin fudged some of the early history of Medjugorje in order to have it fit the scriptural analogy here. Because Thomas was the one who doubted. Judas, there's no recording of him doubting. There's a technical distinction, but it was more accurate to state doubting Thomases instead of doubting Judases. And so Laurentin took it upon himself to amend that text. And I don't remember who it was that first brought it out, this fact, but you can find it in the literature. I think this gentleman's come up before, but he's done a lot of good work on Medjugorje. Marco Cavaglia, who has the website Medjugorje Without a Mask, I believe he talks about this and he shows you what the sources are, book, page number, chapter, verse, all that stuff. Marco is a very reliable man when it comes to information on Medjugorje, and I think he has it in there. I don't know if Donald Foley in his book on Medjugorje has it. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure Marco does. So that's just a fact right there. So if we're going to talk about the fruits of Medjugorje, well, one of its major apologists is fudging it in order to make it harmonious with what Scripture tells us and make it not look awkward for the Virgin, the Gospel of Medjugorje. So again, there's a much larger discussion here, and I'm not trying to besmirch Father Laurentin, but I watched this and I was like, well, that's funny. We're not being told what Laurentin did with Medjugorje. He helped the miracle along, so to speak, or tried to, if we want to believe it to be a miracle. Now, of course, I'm not here to talk about Medjugorje, but the point about fruits, Medjugorje is very well known for the disobedience that has come rampantly out of that place. So, but nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to talk about that. All right, so then they jump to talking about another alleged apparition called Garabandal, and they involve St. Padre Pio in this. I don't want to get into that because it's not my focus here. The next point comes in at the 607-ish mark. They're talking about they're getting into the fourth secret of Fatima controversy, which for those who have followed our discussions here on Fatima, here on Reason and Theology, most of you already know all about that. But here's what they say about this subject.
Padre Pio did not live long enough to know Medjugorje, but he knew of Garabandal. And there is Fatima. This book, remarkably enough, I was able to get the second half what the Italians call El Cuarto Secreto di Fatima, no? The fourth secret of Fatima.
Okay, so he has a thick French accent, but just to be clear, he's saying that his book has the fourth secret of Fatima, the so-called fourth secret. He has the missing text, the words of the Virgin. This is what he has just claimed. Now, he continues.
Which was purposely to this day.
That is a hugely controversial claim because, first of all, a lot of people don't even believe there is such a thing because they believe that the secret that was released in 2000 by John Paul II and with Cardinal Ratzinger was just it. A lot of Fatima scholars, however, say, oh, no. Most of the the apparitions of Our Lady of Fatima had a vision and then an explanation. And here was the second vision that was presented, but no explanation. And so there was also, so a lot of scholars said, no, that's not the full thing, although it was attested to. But what I love.
All right, so then John Henry Weston jumps into this and starts talking about how this is a huge claim. And it is. If you can produce the text, that would be a very huge claim. And I would like to see this text myself. But the thing about it is this text does not exist. It doesn't exist. And they don't talk about why we know it doesn't exist. And I again, we talked about this before, reason and theology, but to reiterate it, the Carmelites of Coimbra, the community that where Sister Lucia lived from the 1948 to her death in 2005, they wrote a beautiful biography right here. This is the Portuguese version, A Pathway into the Gaze of Mary in English. And we now have the words of Our Lady that when she told Sister Lucia to write down the third part of the secret. And Our Lady was very, very clear in this text when she gave this order to Sister Lucia, but we never knew this until October of 2013. And Our Lady, and I'm going to translate straight from the Portuguese right here on page 266. She very clearly says, "Do not fear. God wished to test your obedience, faith, and humility." Then she says, "Esta em paz, be at peace, and write that which they command you, but not that which is given to you to understand of its meaning or significance, significado." Now, I'm going to put this next part in here because this comes up later. She then said, once it is written, put it into an envelope, enclose it, and seal it. And on the outside, write que se puede ser abierto en 1960, that it can only be opened in 1960 by the Lord Cardinal Patriarch of Lisbon or by the Lord Bishop of Leiria. Here it is, right here, not making this stuff up. The Carmelites even reproduced the page of Sister Lucia's handwritten document right here. Right here. It's not making it up. It's right there in the book. So why is this a big deal? Because now we know that Our Lady had made a distinction. Write what they command you, but not that which is given to you to understand of its meaning. In other words, the text that was published in the year 2000 is a description of the vision, but there is no explanation of it because in written form, because Our Lady said, don't write it down. What the significado, do not write down the significado. That's the Portuguese word. So this just screams out loud the question. If Our Lady expressly commanded Irma Lucia not to write down the meaning, where in the world is this gentleman getting a second text with the words of the Virgin? if Our Lady had expressly commanded it not to be written down. Where is this gentleman getting this text from? He doesn't really say. And this is a problem, because when John Henry Weston comes in, he says a lot of Fatima scholars say that, that this is one thing, but, we've got this other thing going on over here, and, and nobody's really in agreement apparently. And it's like, well, no. And the problem, that's one of the problems here, is people are not being precise, and they're not being faithful to the established history. When we say that there was something else, we now know, because of the disclosures in this book, that those words are technically correct, that there was something else. But now the focus shifts from that point to, why don't we have that something else? Is it because what they said earlier, the Vatican is covering it up for whatever reason? Or is it because of what I just said is just right here in the page from Sister Lucia's diary, that the Virgin said, don't write it down? That's the crux upon which all of this revolves. The words of Our Lady that were revealed when this book was published in October of 2013. This revelation in the Carmelite's biography changed this entire discussion. But Mike, I know you try to keep to a charitable line here, and I will try to do this, but I'm going to say this because it needs to be said out loud. People are behind the 8 ball on Fatima scholarship. I'm sorry, but that's just the honest way of it. I don't mean that in a rude way. I'm just saying it. People have not they are so far behind the 8 ball. It's terrible. People aren't reading the books. They're not going to the sources. And it's driving me and other people up a wall, because we're like, folks, like, it's right here. It's very simple. Why are you complicating this? So anyway, having said that, it appears as though, best as I can tell, this gentleman doesn't present this book and the contents in this interview. Maybe he does in the book, and I'm willing for somebody to show that. Maybe he accounts for it, but he still doesn't. I have every reason to question it, because this is a major point. If he doesn't bring it up in this interview with John Henry Weston, and he doesn't, well, how do you account for the so-called two texts? So it continues on now. And just to be clear, the so-called fourth secret is supposedly these words of Our Lady that explain the vision of the third part of the secret. The dialogue continues throughout the next several minutes, and then they go back to talking about like stuff from like Ratzinger, things that he had said. I'm not going to get into that, because this is at this point where they start combining Akita, the alleged apparitions in Akita, Japan, with Fatima. And that's a very common thing that people do, because supposedly Cardinal Ratzinger told certain people, including the Bishop of Akita, John Ito, that the message of Fatima and the message of Akita are essentially the same. Well, no one's ever really proven this. First of all, it's all been word of mouth. There's no public document, as far as I know, and maybe it's in the book from this Frenchman. And I'd be willing to look at it, of course, if he can, present something in writing from Ratzinger. But thus far, it's always been part of the verbal tradition. Ratzinger supposedly said something to the ambassador, Howard D., and then supposedly said something to John Ito. But at the same time, the messages of Akita were not approved. There was a crying statue that was approved. But when you look at the bishop's letter, Bishop Ito's letter on the matter, he doesn't state that the messages are approved. He only says that the lacrimating statue, the crying statue phenomenon, was considered to be supernatural. So we're automatically in the realm of an unapproved alleged revelation, being combined now with Fatima. Now, I'm willing to entertain some of this notion or some of these combinations that people are doing with respect to Akita and Fatima. But I do think it needs, first of all, Akita needs to be approved if it is supernatural in origin. And then two, you have to do these things with a very careful hand, otherwise you start going off the deep end. And the reason why people want to connect Akita to Fatima is because of a very, very stark prophecy, that alleged prophecy that was associated with the unapproved messages, wherein the Virgin talks, supposedly the Virgin talks about how bishop will oppose bishop, cardinal against cardinal, and all these terrible things with all of the clergy. Well, a lot of people now here in 2022 look back and go, well, the proof is in the pudding. Look at all the sex scandals and all this other stuff. Akita must have been right. Well, that's not how we do business.
Didn't Ratzinger say that the message of Fatima and Akita are one and the same?
That's what I'm talking about. Where did he say that in a public document?
Gotcha. Okay, I'm following you now. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's like show me in a public document where Ratzinger makes that connection.
I'm following you. Gotcha.
I'm open to it.
Yeah.
Because you could. I think it's possible to make some connections,
Mhm.
but first you have to prove the supernatural character of Akita first, and that has not been established.
Mhm.
And then if that is established, that it is, then you have to do this very, very carefully, like what we talked about in our webinar series last year here on R&T. You have to do certain things with a very careful, like surgical precision here. And I brought that up specifically in connection with maybe Akita, but also I want to say Quito and Ecuador from the 1600s. So they continue on for the next several minutes talking about these connections. At the 922 to 940 mark, they make the specific thing, but they also say that how that the text that was published in the year 2000 has nothing to do with this message from Akita about bishops opposing bishops, cardinals against cardinals, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that's necessarily the case. And this is where you first have to prove Akita as legit, as in supernatural, but also the surgical precision. You have to understand the third part of the secret correctly. And we have our 6 webinar series that here on R&T, and I want to encourage everybody to go watch those. There is a transcript of it, not a transcript. There's the text of the presentations on my website as well on PDF format. People can see how it is. But basically, the third part of the secret is a visualization of what Our Lady had prophesied in the second part of the secret. And it shows the fidelity of Christians to the gospel of Jesus Christ, universally represented by the sign of the cross that we see clearly in the third part of the secret. That's the essential nuts and bolts of how to interpret that text. So if there are those who are faithful, you're going to have those that are not faithful. So if you have bishops opposing bishops, cardinals against cardinals, you can see how there might be a connection there, because you may have good cardinals against bad cardinals, or maybe it doesn't matter if they're good or bad or bad. Maybe it's just division in the church in general, So you could see how that's possible to read that into that context. But again, Akita is not established as supernatural. So we're playing games here. We're playing intellectual games here, figuring these things out. But I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater either, because as far as I know, it has not been judged either way. I don't know if it's still open on Akita, the case before in the diocese there in Japan. But it's possible, but you have to be careful and not lose your head in these affairs, which is very, very easy to do. So they continue along, and again they talk. It's through the 1042 to 1135 mark. Then I think they're quoting what the precise stuff from Akita. We only have so much time, so I can't go into everything. But there was this next point that comes around the 1201 mark that I do want to get to. It goes for about a minute and a half, But again, I do these things in order to provide proper context and, that it's fair, that I'm presenting things accurately. So I'm going to mute my mic, and you're going to hear them talk more about what happened in the year 2000 and the interpretation of the church of the third part of the secret.
The third secret of Fatima.
This is so interesting because if folks go online, look up the third secret of Fatima as presented in 2000 by the Vatican, you read it. It's a vision. It's about them the children seeing a bishop dressed in white, passing in front of what looks like a mirror. Then the Pope, they say, is walking in a city half in ruins over dead bodies. And he goes up a hill where he kneels before a cork tree or something like that, and then is shot and killed with arrows and bullets, and as well as other priests and faithful and so on. And that's basically it. They tried to explain the Pope gets shot is the shooting of John Paul II. That was the official interpretation. But there was so much nonsense, not only in what they said, what they presented, but even that interpretation was ludicrous because, of course, in the vision, it says the Pope died. And of course, John Paul II didn't die.
Okay. There's so much wrong here. It's hard to begin. And to be quite honest, it's kind of infuriating listening to Weston on this point. He's ignorant. And I mean that in the most charitable way. He's ignorant in the sense that he just doesn't know. First, he claims, the first part is generally okay. He relays what the content, what the essential nuts and bolts of the vision. Okay, I'm not really there's no real issue I would give there. But when he then starts to say, they tried to explain the Pope gets shot is the shooting of John Paul II, and that's basically it. They tried to explain the Pope gets shot in the shooting of John Paul II. That was the official interpretation, but there was so much nonsense. Not only what they said, what they presented, but even that interpretation was ludicrous because, of course, in the vision it says the Pope died, and of course John Paul II didn't die. Excuse me. All right, let's start with his use of the third person plural pronoun. They tried. Is this us versus them? This tone is absolutely inappropriate. John Henry Weston, right there, just in his use of the third person, it's us versus them. They, the evil people over in Rome, the boogeyman. Okay, they've tried to explain it off as this way. They, the mysterious they, right? We don't ever mysterious. Well, there's that point, but now here's the second part. That's actually not what the Vatican said in the year 2000. When I published my book 5 years ago on the third part of The Secret of Fatima, there was something very unique that came along with this book. There were two parts. When the church published the third part of The Secret of Fatima, it did so in this little booklet, Il Messaggio di Fatima. But this booklet was only one part of that presentation, of the publication. The second part was a Q&A that followed. There was the publication of the book. There were interventions or talks by Bertone and Ratzinger, and the Holy See's press office director, then Dr. Joaquin Navarro-Valls, was present, and they talked a little bit. And then Ratzinger and Bertone fielded questions moderated by Joaquin Navarro-Valls. The Vatican published this, and this is on the Vatican's website. This is what John Henry Weston told everybody to go see. I have the book for him. But the Vatican never published the transcript of that Q&A. And of course, it had to be a transcript because that wasn't scripted. Well, no one had that transcript for 17 years, just shy of 17 years, until my book came along. Because what I did was I realized the situation for what was going on, and I said, we don't actually have this. And this is kind of important. So right here on page 364 of my book, I present it in the Italian, and then in the English translation. And it's right here, all of the Q&A. And when you look at what Ratzinger and Bertone actually said at this time, they do not state that the assassination attempt on John Paul's life on May 13th, 1981, fulfilled the vision, that is, of the Pope getting shot. They didn't say that. Instead, Ratzinger talked about an entire century of evil. He takes a broader focus. And this, we covered this, I think, in the webinars last year. But he says that there's an entire century of evil that is presented in this text, in this vision. And it's not one singular pope that's represented in this vision. It's a whole series of popes represented in the singular figure of the bishop vestido en blanco, dressed in white. And this, people have lost, they've lost this understanding, in part because we didn't have it available in the public until my book was published 5 years ago. But now, however, this is one of the reasons why I say some folks are behind the 8 ball here in Fatima scholarship. We now have the text. People have to restore what actually was said, and they have to reconcile these differences, because the literature has gone on for 17 years and no one's corrected it until I came along with providing the account, or maybe some others did and I just don't see it, and I don't want to belittle anything that they may have done. I just don't know about it. But they don't say that it fulfilled, that the word that was used in Italian was culminato, it culminated, but not fulfilled. Because a pope's life being brutally attacked like that, that's very serious, you know. Now, it is true John Paul II didn't die. And I think there are some very interesting interpretations that we could get into with respect to the recent revelations of Charles Murr about the death of John Paul I. I think one can make a really interesting argument here. But again, those are the specifics of the nitty-gritty. That's not actually what the Vatican said. They took up that broader focus, but John Henry Weston doesn't present this to us. And if indeed the Fatima experts that he mentioned earlier are Kramer, Gruner, Ferrara, etc., Antonio Socci, who wrote the Fourth Secret of Fatima book, Il Quarto Segreto di Fatima, then what we're seeing now then is John Henry Weston is outdated. His sources are outdated, essentially. And he continues to rehash what is now old, dated information. And so this is what I think is popping up here in this particular scene. They go on in this section to again try to connect it back to Fatima, to Akita, and again say this has nothing to do with what Akita said. Well, again, they're presuming the supernatural character of Akita, you know. And so it's John Henry will kick the discussion back to the author of this book, Revelations, and the author will start talking about Padre Luigi Villa, who he ran a magazine for many years called Chiesa Viva, the Living Church. And I'm familiar with this publication. Even the late, great Dr. Alice von Hildebrand spoke approvingly of Father Villa. Father Villa knew Padre Pio and claimed to have been commissioned to investigate and root out Freemasonry in the church. And this publication was all about things that he had tried to uncover and expose, etc. And the French author here, Xavier Ayres, tries talking about Father Villa's work in relation to the so-called Fourth Secret and the supposed real text. So he's basing now the Fourth Secret text upon Father Villa, at least in this interview as it comes across in my attention anyway. And at the 1346 mark, he then talks about the second envelope. And he presents the second of the third part of the secret. He presents this in terms of it being proof of the fourth secret. Supposedly, there was one envelope where Sister Lucia had put the text that was published in the year 2000, and then there was a second envelope with words of the Virgin that explain it. That, again, is outdated information because we now have a lot more historical data, including understanding Sister Lucia's own mind. She was terrified of her letters being lost in the mail, and she didn't want that. She would only do certain very sensitive correspondence. She would take great measures to have security on the documents. So when she wrote down the third part of the secret, first, I actually reproduced it. She had an outer envelope that looked like this, and inside of this envelope was a smaller one, wherein she wrote down what Our Lady had told her. Per ordem expressa di Nostra Signora, iste envelope se pose se aberto 1960. That by the express order of Our Lady, this envelope can only be opened in 1960, etc., etc. This would be envelope one. This is what Monsieur Ayres is talking about. Then when you open it up, there's another envelope on the inside. And even on the original documents, it goes perfectly within it, indicating that it was meant to go in this envelope. Sister Lucia repeats the same order that Our Lady, that she wrote on the first envelope. And on the back, she sealed them with green seals, if I remember correctly. And inside of the smaller envelope was the text containing the third part of the secret of Fatima. I don't have anything written here, but you can see the basic demonstration that I'm giving you here. You see the basic demonstration. So the argument here that Monsieur Ayres talks about is that 2 envelopes, 2 texts. Third part published in the year 2000, words of Our Lady. It's not true. It's not true. It's a bunk interpretation. A lot of it was based upon a mistranslation of the Portuguese. And what Sister Lucia intended. I'm not going to get into the whole thing here because it's actually a minor point in the video. But it's very clear. The smaller envelope fit into the larger one, indicating that it was meant to be in there. It's not 2 envelopes, 2 texts. Sister Lucia was concerned for the security of the document, and she didn't want anybody going like this up to the light and trying to read her text. We know this because it's in the Carmelite's biography that I mentioned earlier, that Sister Lucia was concerned for security in her very sensitive and private documents. So again, this is another instance where folks that are promoting the fourth secret conspiracy theory are in fact out of date and behind the 8 ball in the actual scholarship. He repeats it again between the 1412 to 1424 mark here in the interview, this 2 text stuff. And he even said, Lucia dos Santos wrote 2 in 2 envelopes, first the vision and the second of all the message that accompanied the vision, and the message given to Lucia dos Santos per Reverend Father Vila, because as such in Portugal, it talks about that famous land of Portugal and the dogma of the faith. But again, it's bunk. It's not 2 envelopes, 2 texts. That's a debunked interpretation. Monsieur Ayres does not seem to know what the scholarly literature has actually done on this front. Fast forward a little bit to the 1822 to 2017 mark. He now gets into a famous incident with La Salette, the apparitions of Our Lady at La Salette. Our Lady communicated a secret to the visionaries of La Salette in France, which took place, I think it was in the 1840s, I want to say 1846, around there. And there was some controversy over this text because there was one version, the original version that was written by the visionary Melanie, and then there was a later expanded version that appeared by, I think, around 1876, around there. And the second version was much more sensational, much more sensational. Talking about how Rome will lose the faith and become the seat of Antichrist. Well, people are interpreting this nowadays along the lines of these questions surrounding Pope Francis and modernism in the church and Vatican II and Nostra Aetate, and I mean, pick your poison, pick an example from the 60s onward. Well, somebody brought it. This is not my observation, and to be clear, I don't know who it was, but somebody brought it up, and I thought it was a really good observation. If Our Lady did state that Rome will lose the faith and become the seat of Antichrist, she would have said that in the 1840s. That was some 24, 25 years before the fall of papal Rome, the fall of the papal states. And then the Freemasonic forces of Garibaldi and others, maybe Garibaldi was a little bit earlier, but either which way, the forces that were seeking the destruction of papal Rome conquered Rome in 1870, and the papal states officially fell. Well, that was the city of Rome. So if they were led by bad characters, one could sit there and say that Rome, not the Holy See, not the Pope of Rome, became the seat of Antichrist. So there was that distinction between Rome, the city, and the chair of Peter. And as the person who wrote the book on Pope Leo XIII's vision, I can state that there's a lot of merit to that interpretation because of what Leo himself said in the beautiful extended prayer of Leo to the prayer to the exorcism prayer to Saint Michael, the exorcismus prayer. Another story for another time. But
can I ask a question here about La Salette? From
Sure.
what I've seen, the claim, number one, Rome will lose the faith and become the seat of the Antichrist. That, first of all, that could be understood as the people of the city of Rome, not necessarily the Pope. But that clause, to my knowledge, was added later on and found itself on the index of forbidden books and has not been approved by Rome. Is that incorrect? Is my research there correct?
Yes, you are correct. It did make it to the index. Now, there are some questions about if that was done on shaky ground. I have to be fair. There are some scholars there's been some scholarship that has attempted to go back and revisit that question, because there are some who believe that Rome's actions on putting on the index were based upon faulty information or a shaky foundation. Now that he has since gone to God, I think I can state this. I am in possession of an early draft of one of those studies. Father Dominique Bourmeau of the Society of St. Pius X was working on. He was one of those that was working on that study. And Bourmeau was a gentleman and a scholar. He passed away of COVID. I'm sorry, I get a little emotional because I knew him personally. He was a good man. I disagreed with him on some things, but he was a good man, a gentleman, and a scholar. I will say that. I have to be honest and say that. It's composed in French, so I haven't had the time to really read it, and translate it. But I do know that Father Bourmeau was working on it. It wasn't announced because he was working on it, but now that he has since passed away, I don't think there's any harm in mentioning that. So there was some work being done on that, to be fair. But yes, as it stands in legal terms, yes.
Do we have any evidence that Rome ever approved that additive clause?
No.
Okay.
No, it had been granted an imprimatur by the local bishop.
Right.
I don't remember the name of the diocese, but of course, a local bishop doesn't trump Rome.
Sure.
So, but again, there's a lot of debate on this among scholars, and I'm not a La Salette scholar, admittedly, so I want to be fair to both sides. I do tend to fall more on the side of what Rome had said, but I also haven't seen all of the arguments, and I'm open. It's an ongoing discussion, and I'm
like I said, I mean,
to the evidence.
Even if it's accurate, I don't think it has to mean the spin that I hear some people put on it, meaning that the Pope himself will lose the faith or that the papacy will become the seat of the Antichrist. I've seen that spin, and I don't think that logically follows from the words. But more importantly, like you said, I haven't seen it approved.
No,
And-
it's I tend to discredit it. Like I said, I state this openly. I don't necessarily think that it's legitimate, but at the same time, I do recognize that the jury is still out on it because scholars have been doing some work on it, and I would be interested to see if they're able to prove the case.
Oh, I'd like to hear that too. But for those who promote this extra clause, I never hear them talk about these additional facts, about it finding its way on the index, about it not being approved. I don't hear them talking.
They talk as if it's legitimate, which is actually a good segue into the point that I was going to bring up, because this is I would have paid money to have watched this. But one of the things that Monsieur Ayres, the gentleman that wrote the book Revelations, talked about to John Henry Weston was how there was a guy who found the document in question with the extended second, the second version of the La Salette secret in the Vatican archive somewhere in 1999. Well, that's actually a pretty well-known study. It's in a French book. They wrote about it, and Father René Laurentin did, in fact, have something to do with it. They had, I don't know if it was like a press conference or something on it, but it was done to some fanfare in the late 90s, early 2000s, because I believe the gentleman that found it was part of the dissertation work that he was doing in Rome at the time. Well, fast forward a few years. When scholars collide, let me tell you, people think that they're dry, sawdust academics. You get a ticked off scholar, oh man, you're going to see sparks fly. I was not in the room. I wasn't even at the conference where it took place, but I heard the story from somebody who was there and who is a very prominent Mariologist here in this country, the United States. He told me the story about how, I think it was 2008 at Lourdes. I want to say when they had the Mariological Conference in Lourdes that year. I want to say it was 2008. Father René Laurentin was there, but also one of the La Salette scholars, Jean Stern. Stern let into Laurentin like you would not believe, like calling him out on the floor, because basically what he said was, he's like, how dare you? Who do you think you are? You're causing trouble with this stuff. We already had the text of this letter, and you're presenting it like we never knew all of this stuff. We've known about this letter from Melanie for several years. I've written about it in my book, because he wrote a 3-volume like definitive history on La Salette, and he just went boom on Laurentin. I would have paid money to watch that. That sparks flew at that moment, but Stern was very upset. He was not a happy camper with Laurentin for that. As good and as reputable as a Mariologist as Father René Laurentin was, not everybody's perfect, and he, in my humble opinion, made a mistake by promoting La Salette the way that he did when this document was found. Because it already was known. I remember coming across. I'm 25 years a Catholic this year. I remember reading that document way back before it was discovered at the Vatican by that gentleman working on his dissertation. I think he was a religious. I think I remember reading this, so it was already out there. So when I found out what had happened between Stern and Laurentin, I was just kind of like, well, yeah, no duh. I mean, isn't that, why is this a big deal? Why was Laurentin treating this like it was some big, to do? It wasn't. It was already known. It had been in the literature, in the public literature for years. It's just nobody had the original letter. So that's the only real novelty here, was now we had the original letter. But otherwise, it had gotten out through other means. But again, Monsieur Ayres is talking again like this is some big deal, because again, he's presenting it from that Laurentin perspective because he knew Laurentin. But for those of us who have been involved in these discussions, we're like, well, what's the big deal here? You're beating a dead horse, and that's essentially what Jean Stern said to Laurentin. Again, I'm going by my memory on this from what I was told. I wasn't there in the room. I heard it from a reputable and very prominent Mariologist here in the United States. And this was about 6 years ago, so my memory I may not be precise on the details, but there was a confrontation between the La Salette scholar Jean Stern with Laurentin on this point. That I don't think anybody disputes that. Okay, so they move along again in the interview, and again we see we see a return to that point about what the church has done with these alleged messages around the 2104 mark. So I'm going to fast forward because again, I want everybody to hear this.
By the way, you could continue. I have to step away for just a second, but go ahead. I'll be right back.
Okay.
But most particularly to all fathers, to all husbands who are responsible of families, these messages are meant to be read, to be heard. And what the church has done in these past centuries is unforgivable, at least in human terms. It all belongs to God to do so. The remarkable amount of information in these messages is extraordinary. And some of your auditors will possibly wonder, but why? Why on earth did the church do such an appalling, such a ghastly thing? The answer, I'm afraid, is because in many of these messages, like in La Salette, like in Fatima, and like in La Prodée, the Virgin Mary reproaches the clergy of not following her son, Jesus Christ.
Okay, so hopefully everybody, caught that. He says very explicitly what the church has done in these past centuries regarding these alleged messages or actual messages. He says is unforgivable. That's the word he says. It's unforgivable. And then he said that the remarkable of info in this message is extraordinary, and people wonder why the church, and these are his words, why did the church do such an appalling, such a ghastly thing? What is this appalling, ghastly thing? Hide this from us. That's what he's saying. The church hid this stuff from us. And then he says the reason why, because in many of this, Our Lady reproaches the clergy for not following her son, Jesus Christ. So, bad. This explains all of the bad stuff that we're going through right now, all the malaise in the church. It's because of the corrupt clergy. And this is why we didn't get the third secret of Fatima in 1960 and why the Vatican didn't release the La Salette stuff until 1999 when that guy found the document. This is borderline slander. This is borderline slander. It's not even true. The church did not squelch this stuff. It is true that the document, the so-called extended Secret of La Salette, made it to the index. How is the church hiding it? Is she's putting it publicly on the index, stating, "Yep, this exists, and we've got some problems with it theologically because of whatever the reasons were." But then with the third part of the Secret of Fatima, they're saying that the church covered it up or squelched it until the year 2000 and still continues to do so because of the fourth secret stuff, right? That's a logical extension of what's being said here. And it's not true. It's not true. Again, Our Lady herself commanded Irma Lucia not to write down the meaning, the significado of the third part of the secret. So the Vatican can't be covering up something that the Virgin Mary herself told Sister Lucia not to write. In other words, how do you say that? How do you cover up a text from the public when the Virgin herself already took care of that matter by saying there is to be no text? People are blaming the Holy See. They're pointing the fingers and they are committing heinous acts against the Holy See. That's a crime. That is a moral outrage. I'm not saying the clergy are perfect. I'm not saying Rome is perfect. But I am saying if you're going to make an accusation, you really should have your ducks lined up in a row. And so far, what we're seeing in this interview is not the ducks are not lined up properly. They're not. There's no ducks even really when you really sit and think about it in a way. So again, they continue on again, talking about other areas of interest in this subject. And then around the 2729 to 2749 mark, he does make an interesting comment about that touches upon the nature of private revelation. Monsieur Eres is going to mention how there's problems if the church approves something but then unapproves it. And I want you to hear what he says for himself here at this point.
Nothing can be done to destroy the deeds and the works of God. It made sense. It took me a long time finally to digest this information, but it is indeed the duty of the church to try to find any controversy, any contradiction to any apparition first before approving it. Because if tomorrow, God forbid, one day they were to approve something that they would prove to be a falsehood, it would be the entire credibility of the Catholic Church that would collapse. In regards to the...
Okay, did everybody catch that? He said that the entire credibility of the Catholic Church is shot, essentially, if it is proven that if they approved an alleged private revelation, but then it was discovered later that it wasn't supernatural, he says the entire credibility of the Catholic Church would collapse. That's theologically erroneous. The church does not enjoy the charism of infallibility with respect to alleged private revelations. Private revelations are not a matter of the deposit of faith. And it is upon that point that the church has the charism of infallibility when she speaks on divine revelation, interprets it, etc. Whether or not Joe Schmo or Jane Schmain saw the Virgin Mary, that does not invoke the charism of infallibility. So you can have people like, because if it's true that if something was approved but then disapproved, it would have to be true in the reverse. If something was declared to be not true, but all of a sudden was true, that the same principle then operates. Oh, the church makes a mistake. Well, we know that could happen because look what happened with the Divine Mercy, the chaplet of the Divine Mercy. It's Saint Maria Faustina Kowalska, and the famous diary. That had been, the diary was on the Index of Forbidden Books. Speaking of the index, but that was reversed under then Cardinal Karol Wojtyła when it was discovered that the process that led to that was based upon faulty information. So they reversed it, and now we have the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, and Low Sunday is now Divine Mercy Sunday. So I don't really think Monsieur Eres has done his homework here. I don't want to be rude, but it's like he just invoked the church's charism of infallibility, if not indirectly, and the church does not enjoy infallibility. I talked about this in my book, Refractions of Light, actually. I have a copy of it here. In my book, Refractions of Light, we talked about this. There was a Father William Saunders, I think I quoted him. He was the source that I went to on that very point. But people want to know more about how apparitions and visions work in the church. You get 201 answers on them in my book. I think it's a little cheaper now than what it's stated here because this is a first edition, first print. But you can get it on Amazon. So people can see these things for themselves, complete with the documents on the matter. So again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think Monsieur Eres is a sincere man. He himself says at the 34th moment he was motivated by great graces that God has bestowed upon him. And he talks about being a husband, a father, a Knight of Columbus. Certainly I don't think there's malice that's intended, but I do think that nevertheless some maliciousness is still being done by these accusations that are not founded. This book purports to be, according to John, it's meticulous, I think was the word he used, and yet very simple proofs are just blowing apart whole sections of the interview. It's not, things are not adding up. They don't add up. The end, we have to kind of speed through here, but he ends on about how we should be, he donates his royalties for the book to a charity. I don't think he specifies which one. And you can find this information from the 34-20 mark onward. He encourages people to do the 5 first Saturdays, pray the rosary, fast. Of course, he does the Medjugorje version with, he says it mentions on Wednesdays. Okay, those are not, no one can really, telling somebody to pray, that's not going to be, that's really not, I don't think anybody can really take much of an issue with that. But they end on another note. They end on the French-Canadian exorcist priest. And Monsieur Erez says that he finds him absolutely remarkable. This is Le Père Michel Rodrigue, who made a splash on the scene through the website Countdown to the Kingdom and Mark Mallet. Well, Jimmy Akin had a wonderful review over on his Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. I think is that the title of it, Mike? The Mysterious World? Yeah.
Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Shout out to Jimmy Akin. Awesome show. By the way, shout out to Catholic Answers sponsoring this video and all of these videos, because that camera lens right there is from Catholic Answers. So again, shout out to them.
Okay. Well, there you go. Yeah. I mean, Jimmy Akin was, he had a spot on. I kid you not. He actually went to maps. Okay, he took one of Father Michel Rodrigue's claims about a woman that was at like Christmas Mass, something like that, and she was at a certain church, and Father Michel had specified, and how something happened during Mass, she had to go to the hospital, and then suddenly she was back at the hospital. Jimmy Akin actually got out a map of that area, and like triangulated everything. And he said it is impossible for this story to be true because of this, and this other reason. I mean, he just had a takedown like you wouldn't believe. I sat back and I was like, I bow to the master. I was like, I don't have to do a thing here. Jimmy already did it, So I have to give mad props to Jimmy Akin for that, because it was one of the best takedowns of these claims that I've ever seen in my life. It was gentlemanly, masterfully, and then he even had another dust up recently over the matter, because I think it came up with Mark Mallet or something. There was some recent dust up between the two of them, and Jimmy Akin stuck to his guns. So this is the danger. So I want to tie this back to what I said at the beginning. This is the danger of taking this, that, and the other alleged revelation, throwing it all together and saying, hey, I got the problems to the malaise of the church. I'm sorry to take away people's security blankets, but that's not how Holy Mother Church operates, much less how God himself operates. You don't take a mishmash and somehow it's borderlining divination. That's what this is. It's borderlining divination, where you're trying to figure out these little oracles of God, or you think are oracles of God and what God might be. This is just poor discernment at the end of the day, very poor discernment. And it's misleading the people of God, because now they're following this, that, or the other thing. And now we've got this us versus them. It's Rome versus the world. And we're the faithful remnant. We're the good guys, eternal Rome, if I may borrow from the SSPX's terminology, versus, modernist Rome. We are so polarized in the church and in the world today. And that polarization comes out in this interview. And it's sad to see, and dare I say frustrating and angrily so, Fatima, La Salette being thrown like this in ways that was never intended, never, ever, ever intended. So I tell people, go to the sources. Go to the sources. If you read French, read the 3 volumes by Jean Stern on La Salette. They are considered to be like standard. I don't remember the name of the books off the top of my head, but Jean Stern, Jeanstern, is his name. I think he was one of the La Salette fathers, if I remember correctly. Of course, there's my book on Fatima. There's Donald Foley's book on Medjugorje. Marco Cavallia's website. There are good with Fatima. You've got the Sanctuary of Fatima. You've got this whole beautiful series on the documents of Fatima you can go to. The memoirs of Sister Lucia. There are so many good resources that when you actually dive into them, you get the story. You begin to understand what really took place. Earlier, Mike, you had Steve Dawson on the show. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. If I may make a plug for something.
Go ahead.
I won't go into too many details, but I'm happy to say, I'm very privileged even to say that I've been working with St. Paul Street Evangelization for the past few months, working on a Fatima and Evangelization video series. And we just actually, this wasn't planned, by the way. We didn't plan this out like Mike and I and Steve. We didn't coordinate all of this, so we're not doing like a one-two-knockout punch to try. This just is complete coincidence, and I can't let the coincidence pass up. But we just today started releasing this video series, and it begins with this really powerful story of an elderly nun, and the series ends with how that story resolves itself. I could cry because it's such a beautiful story, but you have to go through everything in between to kind of get the lead up to it, to understand why that ending is so impactful. Because St. Paul, and we did it that way because St. Paul Street Evangelization believes very strongly in the power of stories. Mr. Lofton, with your permission, I'd like to show the opening video of this little drama that we were able to put together, if you'd like. I know we probably won't have a lot of time, but the video itself is only like 2 minutes and 50 seconds, I think, something like that.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. Let me. I had the folder right here, right pulled up. And yes, for those of you who love my blooper reels, we do have a blooper reel. I know everybody loves the bloopers. I do. I had fun making them. Okay. So is this coming up on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I think I have to mute my mic again, right? I think.
Correct.
Okay.
An elderly nun was sitting in the silence of her cell. Though cloistered, news and reports had reached her about terrible things happening in the church and in the world. A revolt against God had arisen. Raised from her infancy to love and honor God and to obey his commandments, the nun knew the effects that this revolt would have in the church and in the world. Among them, the destruction of peace, that peace which is part of the purity of heart, necessary to see God. Indeed, the nun knew the situation for what it was. As if in the Garden of Gethsemane, Holy Mother Church was suffering the passion of her Lord. She was traversing a period of darkness, one that was being promoted by the powers of hell itself. Honor and reverence for the sacred was being despised, and those who maintained the holy faith were ridiculed, persecuted, if not martyred. The nun recalled the Lord's words, "This is your hour and the power of darkness." As if in response to the darkness, faith and love arose within the elderly nun's heart. Accustomed as she was for so long now to suffer for God as a holocaust, she immolated herself for love of God and for the salvation of souls. With these thoughts in her mind, as her head tilted on the windowsill, the nun cried out to God, "Lord, you promise that the gates of hell will not prevail against your church. If need be, Lord, accept my life. I would rather die than fail to serve and love you each day at every moment. My life is one of prayer, sacrifice, and love, O Lord. Use me to help the church." While praying in the midst of this darkness, lit only by the light of her faith, the nun suddenly felt a gentle hand on her left shoulder.
And that's, I seriously could cry because so much work went into this, so much heart went into this. that is such a beautiful encapsulation of so much of the message of Fatima and what Sister Lucia's mission in life was. Spoiler, the elderly nun is Sister Lucia. But it was taken from the biography because the sisters did such a beautiful job revealing the soul of Sister Lucia. And if it wasn't for this book, that would not have been possible. And those are Sister Lucia's words that were recorded. I think maybe a little dramatized for effect. And I think I combined two separate instances, but that's what this is. Like, I mean, it encapsulates so much. And there's so much worthwhile to study there. This is the true, authentic Fatima coming out. And I'm saying that not because I'm the one that, that worked with St. Paul's with it, that wrote the script and everything, but because this is what the documents say. This is what they tell us, For RNT viewers, if we still have time, Mike, would you like me to show how the story ends? I mean, there's a whole lead up to there's the whole lessons that go in between. But if I can offer it as a special for RNT viewers, if we have time, I can show you how the story ends.
Yeah, go ahead, and then after that, we'll wrap it up.
Okay. I'm sorry. I get very emotional over this. I really do. I get very choked up. Okay, so this is the fifth one. Everybody's seeing it all now.
Visionary of Fatima, Lucia dos Santos, who died in 2005. Lucia was known to be very simple, yet full of the wisdom of God. Every so often, when she had an opportunity to evangelize or catechize, she had a special way of edifying her audience. They would encounter not Lucia per se, but God working in and through her. After her entry to religious life, Lucia's mission of prayer, sacrifice, and love intensified. She led a hidden life of much suffering for the world and the church, and the fact that she knew very well the ills plaguing them contributed to this suffering. She kept the flame of true supernatural faith alive in her heart and rejected, as we say in the rite of baptism, the pomps and works of Satan. She is a model for the spiritual life of the evangelist. One last note. The elderly nun in the opening story to this lesson was none other than Sister Lucia. It is based upon actual events of her life. This particular event of Sister Lucia's life shows well her witness to the gospel. So let's see how it ended. She felt a hand on her shoulder. Turning, she saw the Blessed Virgin Mary standing there. Tears in her eyes and with a joy beyond all comprehension, the nun prostrated herself before the Mother of God. "My daughter," said the Virgin, "God has heard your prayer and sent me to tell you that it is necessary to intensify your prayer and your work for the unity of the Church, of the bishops with the Holy Father, and of the priests with the bishops, to lead the people of God on the paths of truth, faith, hope, and love, united in Christ their Savior. God is your comfort, and I am here to help you. It is to serve him that you are still here." End quote. Her desire to serve God thus strengthened and her love burning intensely, Sister Lucia felt the weight of her mission pressed upon her with a renewed sense of joy and urgency. Difficult days were yet ahead of her, she knew. Confident, though, that she was supported by heaven, the nun picked up her cross to follow where her master beckoned.
I can't hear you. You're on mute.
I can't even begin to tell you how much work went into that. And I'm in tears over it because so much work went into that. And I found those beautiful videos for free of that Carmelite nun. It was by Mark Productions over on Pexels.com. And I was like, oh my goodness, this works. It fits. It just made everything's so much better. But those were Our Lady's words to Sister Lucia in December of 1979, you know. And so, like I said, it just encapsulates so much. And this is the real heart and message of Fatima, you know, loving God and, you know, being devoted to what Our Lady said and offering ourselves up. You know, it's that constant yes to what Lucia had said on May 13th, 1917. Do you wish to offer yourselves to God? You know, when all three of the children consented to it. And that's the beauty and that's the power of Fatima. Not this sideshow freak show that you have all these other people doing, you know, and you're seeing. And that's a recent picture, even that beautiful picture of Our Lady with Sister Lucia that was painted by Francisco Correa da Silva. And I was able to work with the Carmel of Coimbra. They were very kind to give us permission at St. Paul's to use that picture for the video. I'll always be grateful to the Carmel for that. So, you know, good things are happening. Good things are happening, you know. So
I appreciate you doing this too. Go ahead and tell us your website. Where can we go to find out more about you and your own work?
people want to visit me, they can come here to, we get the thing out. Just my website, kevinsimmons.com. I've got to put some stuff up here, more recent stuff, especially the new news about the video series. But this is my website here, and just kevinsimmons.com. And please do go to, if you wanted to a little more about the video series, you can go to like the Street Evangelization website. We have the online school. And you know, you go to the courses here. This is where you can see they have, because it's new, it's here at the top, so it's pretty easy. You can just click on it.
Mm-hmm.
And when it wants to load, it'll load. But you'll see it pop up here, and yep. And then you can see, you can watch the first videos. There, we're releasing them systematically I think it's every week or every other week or something like that. Mm-hmm. So you'll see those popping up. But the first one is available along with the summary, and even have a nice PDF. I had to learn Adobe InDesign for this. That's why you see it at the bottom of the screen here, Adobe InDesign, because I had to learn it to work on this. Mm-hmm. And I won't show it here, but on page 9, we got a very rare photo of a certain person. So it's the first time it's being published. So, yep. So
awesome.
It's all that.
Once again, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate your expertise here, your commentary, all that good stuff. I look forward to doing more with you in the future.
All right. Thank you. I look forward to being on again.
Everybody hit that like button, subscribe button. Also check me out at patreon.com/reason and theology if you want to support me. You also get access to extra content. See you later.